Dire warning. The White House sounds the alarm on global warming and critics respond. Her earthly work completed. Mother Teresa's successor passes away. Global celebration. Big stars from around the world line up to perform for Pope Francis in Philadelphia. And sweet sounds. 3 siblings prepare to sing for the Holy Father as he visits South America next month. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, June 23rd, 2015. Good evening from Washington. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. The president calls for swift action to counter global warming. This on the heels of the recent papal encyclical on the environment. Susanne LaFrankie reports from the White House tonight.
Brian, the White House claims tens of thousands of lives and billions of dollars can be saved if action is taken to curb global warming. The EPA issued a report as part of a week-long effort to mark President Obama's 2-year anniversary of his climate action plan. Environmental protection is a divisive political issue here in Washington. Today I spoke to the head of the EPA about the Pope's letter.
The Pope's message is a very comprehensive one. First, he told us that it's our moral responsibility to protect the natural resources that we were given to steward. But even more importantly, he recognized that climate change is most impactful, most damaging to those who have the least. That is a message that will resonate. It's about minority communities, communities of color, those low-income communities that are least able to make a change, to adapt to a changing climate. And he told us that it's time for us to have a more inclusive discussion and relationship with those communities and make it benefit them.
The White House has called the Pope an ally in this environmental front, but the encyclical is more than just climate change. A lot of it had to do with, he calls it human ecology, protecting the most vulnerable, life issues, the sanctity of life. So there are some differences.
Well, there always will be, and I think the Pope speaks with such authority and such conviction that it can't help but move people forward.
Climate change and global warming grabbed the headlines, but the White House ignored the encyclical's moral call on issues of life and gender. The Pope has repeated life begins at conception, and in his latest encyclical highlights the need to value one's own body in its femininity or masculinity as a gift from God. Brian?
Susanne LaFrankie at the White House. Thanks, Susanne. There is sharp disagreement with the White House sounding the alarm on global warming today. Some conservatives say the administration exaggerates the impact of climate change. Wyatt Goolsby is now here with that report.
Yeah, Brian, the Obama administration is not the only group hosting talks on the environment. Today, conservatives who are skeptical of the White House's approach to climate change forcefully spoke out.
Controlling carbon is a bureaucrat's dream. If you control carbon, you control life. And that's what this is all about.
Republican Senator Jim Inhofe not holding back today in his criticism of what he calls climate alarmists. For years, Inhofe has called global warming a hoax.
Mr. President, catch this.
In February, he brought a snowball on the Senate floor. He asked, if global warming is real, then why does it get cold every winter? The Oklahoma senator says he respects Pope Francis, but he doesn't agree with his position on climate change. Inhofe says the Obama administration is using the Holy Father's words for political gain.
Oh, they're rejoicing. They've run out of things to use, and boy, the Pope come along. That's exactly what they would like. I think they'll keep using it and keep using it.
Other skeptics include Patrick Michaels with the libertarian Cato Institute.
They're disregarding an emerging body of science that says that the sensitivity of temperature to carbon dioxide changes is not what people thought it was.
Michaels says that's why proposals to cut carbon emissions are not a solution. Marlo Lewis with the Competitive Enterprise Institute agrees, saying the policies will hurt the poor.
What they need desperately is affordable energy, and the whole anti-carbon crusade is designed to make affordable energy, which is mostly fossil energy, more costly.
Here in Washington, climate change is a highly divisive topic. The Republican-controlled House is expected to vote this week on a bill to scale back federal restrictions on coal-fired power plants. That's part of the president's climate change policy. Brian?
Wyatt Goolsby, thank you. Some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. The Senate votes to begin all-out debate on President Obama's request for fast-track trade negotiating authority. The vote avoids a filibuster and continues a revival process that began last week in the House. Previous presidents have enjoyed fast-track authority. It allows the president to propose trade pacts that Congress can reject or ratify, but not change. The Vatican sets the stage for more debate on hot-button issues by publishing the working outline for its fall meeting on family issues. The document, released today, breaks no major ground on the most divisive issues such as communion for divorced and remarried Catholics.
È possibile anche l'ammissione alla comunione eucaristica? Questa è una domanda a cui il Sinodo vuol dare una risposta.
The Archbishop asking, is Eucharistic communion possible? He says it's a question the Synod hasn't answered yet. The paper repeats that the Church should provide pastoral care for homosexuals and their families, but it goes no farther. Father Robert Gahl, a professor at the Pontifical University of the Holy Cross, is joining us from Rome. Let's begin with this idea of the Church providing pastoral care for people with same-sex attraction. Why is that Church teaching?
Well, it's Church teaching because the Church wants everyone to be a saint. And people who have same-sex attraction also need to live the virtue of holy purity. So the Holy Family is also a model for them.
So it really does call on everyone to live out Church teaching, does it not?
Absolutely. In fact, an important feature of this document is that it affirms that the family is a subject of evangelization, which means not only should we live the gospel, but we should promote the gospel with our lives.
Father, I'm curious, does this paper, is it drawn specifically from the Synod on the family last fall, or was input that was taken since then been included in this working document?
Exactly, it includes both. So it has this structure, which is like the skeleton structure of the document, which is from the final document of the Synod last year. And on top of that are added considerations which were brought in from the survey of the Church around the world. So the components of this text that look like exactly what you'd expect from various opinions that are all over the world within the Church.
Some secular media says it has nuances but very few specifics. Does it specifically address communion for divorced and remarried Catholics?
Well, regarding the divorced and remarried Catholics, it does speak about communion, but also speaks about a process of, first, the possibility of annulment. It indicates that it's a very complex situation. So there could be a possibility of annulment. There could be the possibility, of course, of living the way John Paul II advised in Familiaris Consortio, living perfect continence, so living in a chaste relationship. And that would, as a preparation for Holy Communion. And there's also this possibility, which is mentioned as opinion of some people in the Church, of going through a process of penance along with one's pastor, possible with involvement of one's bishop, whereby one could receive forgiveness for one's situation, and then still receive Holy Communion. Nonetheless, the document also says that these people are called to conversion and are called to stay away from any sin and really to move to conversion.
As we all are called that way. Father Robert Gahl, thanks for joining us from Rome and for the clarification on this working document.
Thank you, Brian. God bless.
Mother Teresa's successor has passed away at age 81. The Missionaries of Charity say Sister Nirmala's health was worsening in recent days. She was born to Hindu parents and was educated by Christian missionaries and reportedly converted after learning of Mother Teresa's work. She received India's second highest civilian award for her service. Well, it is part of the South's history, but what does the Confederate flag stand for today? People around the country are now pushing to remove the flag from public displays. Jason Calvi is here now with that story.
Brian, South Carolina lawmakers have set the stage for a debate on whether to remove the Confederate flag from State House grounds, but it could still be a couple weeks before they vote on the issue. The flag controversy is spreading to other states.
The flag ought to come down.
Hundreds bring that message to the South Carolina State House today, urging lawmakers to vote to take down the Confederate flag from Capitol grounds. Governor Nikki Haley joined the growing chorus yesterday.
The flag will always be a part of the soil of South Carolina. But this is a moment in which we could say that that flag, while an integral part of our past, does not represent the future of our great state.
The flag is featured in pictures posted by Dylan Roof. He's charged with murder in the deaths of 9 black church members. The flag has long stirred controversy. Some see it as a symbol of hate, and others, a sign of the state's history.
It's time for South Carolina to get past its history. History belongs in a place. It belongs in a museum.
The flag has flown at the Confederate Soldier Monument for the past 15 years, after it was removed from the State House dome. A bill passed in 2000 requires a 2/3 majority to bring down the flag. Governor Haley says if lawmakers don't start the process in the coming weeks, she'll call them back for a special session. Jason Calvi, EWTN News Nightly.
We have Star Parker, founder and president of CURE, the Center for Urban Renewal and Education, and author of the new book, Blind Conceit. Should the flag at the South Carolina State House and at other public displays come down?
The State House flag, it looks like the people of South Carolina are agreeing that it should come down. What we should not do as a nation is force our opinion on the state. This is a long history of the state. I was reminding a few that I know lately regarding Charleston, as Charleston is where the Civil War started. So South Carolina has a very delicate history, and the people there will handle these problems once they get past their mourning. But yes, I think that it's time, and they have been progressing toward that end. Keep in mind the flag didn't go up until the 60s, so it doesn't have a lot of the historical context that many are arguing to say keep it up. And they have been progressing to taking it down. About 15 years ago it came off of the state capitol and was placed in the front on the lawn.
I'm old enough to remember the 60s,
Yeah.
the civil rights era. Why do racial divisions persist so far beyond that era?
Well, it's a long history. What happened after the Civil Rights Movement, keep in mind, Dr. King's movement was one of peace. He wanted repentance and revival. But after his death, a political opportunity moved in, I suppose you could call it, and it turned toward this this movement of social justice. And today, the bearers of that movement want revenge as opposed to peace. And we find now much law, including welfare policies, that perpetuate some of the challenges, and then they begin to racially divide because poverty has been concentrated in certain neighborhoods, and people get upset, they get despaired.
We've heard Pope Francis talk about the environment as a moral issue. Don't you see this as a moral issue?
I believe that we should revisit welfare policy of the 60s, where we've passed laws that concentrate poverty, keep kids trapped in failing schools, and then let others take advantage of them by saying it's because of racism that you're in this type of environment and why your lives are in despair. I think that we should allow opportunity for vouchers so children can go to private schools and allow for the religious community to help educate them. And the more broken they are, the more they need those opportunities.
Very quickly, you marched recently in Selma. Why?
I went to Selma because of this whole movement of Black Lives Matter, and what we wanted to do is push the black left to recognize that if Black lives matter every time a white officer shoots a black male, then they should matter in the womb as well. So I joined with the National Coalition of Pro-Life Blacks, and we went across the bridge, Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, to say black women matter. And there's a legal abortionist there. His name is Samuel Lett. He's way outside of the line when it comes to what the Alabama law says. Alabama has been notified on numerous occasions that this man is doing horrible things in this abortion clinic, and they're doing nothing. So we wanted to point to Samuel Lett and let them know that they need to investigate. He's way outside of the legal the legality of what Alabama law allows in abortion, and we want it stopped. This crime against humanity, I believe, is very much connected to the other questions you had, the racial tensions, and even our economic state of affairs. We are in serious trouble as a nation and as a people because we kill our unborn.
Black lives matter, no matter how small. The author of Blind Conceit, Star Parker, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, musicians from 3 continents will be part of a concert for Pope Francis during his visit to Philadelphia this fall. Italian tenor Andrea Bocelli, Colombian pop singer Juanes, and the Philadelphia Orchestra perform for the Festival of Families September 26th. That is the closing ceremony for the World Meeting of Families, a global Catholic conference designed to strengthen family bonds. Up to 2 million people are expected to attend the outdoor Mass celebrated by Pope Francis the following day. Coming up, is the West breaking for an all-out clash with Putin's Russia? And in the heat and dust, these Iraqi refugees sit and wait with little hope. Enter through the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the road broad that leads to destruction, and those who enter through it are many. From today's Gospel according to St. Matthew, thanks for joining us on this Tuesday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. Dr. E. Calvin Beisner is founder of the Cornwall Alliance for Stewardship of Creation, a scholar with the Heartland Institute. Cal, the White House suggests that 57,000 deaths could occur by 2100 if we don't act on climate change. What do you make of their claim?
Pure baloney, to say diplomatically. And the reason for that is that prediction is based on the computer climate models that are the only ground for any predictions about climate future. The problem is the climate models are invalidated by comparison with real-world observations. On average, they predict twice as much warming as actually observed. 95% predict more warming than observed, which means that the errors are not random but biased. And none of them predicted the complete absence of global warming over the last 17 to 27 years, 18 and a half years, according to the satellite data, which are the most credible. So the models are wrong. No predictions, therefore, have any value whatsoever that are made on the basis of them. And therefore, the prediction of these deaths based on those models is complete poppycock.
In Laudato Si', Pope Francis, in his encyclical, talks about that we need to address the environment. Can we do this without being alarmist or politicizing the issue?
Yes, we certainly can. And economic, environmental history, and economic theory alike tell us the same thing. A clean, healthful, beautiful environment is a costly good. Wealthier people can afford more costly goods than poorer people. That means that economic development, not economic contraction, is the real solution to environmental degradation. The wealthier you are, the more you can afford to protect the environment. This is why the greatest environmental disasters are not in the wealthy capitalist countries of the West, but in the poorer, more socialist countries of the rest.
So if we truly see a threat to God's creation, how can we as Christians respond to that?
Well, you know, as we put it, the Cornwall Alliance for the Stewardship of Creation, based on Genesis 1:28, where God blesses Adam and Eve and says to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it and have dominion over everything in it, we're to pursue what we call godly dominion. That is, men and women made in God's image, laboring lovingly together to enhance the fruitfulness, the beauty, and the safety of the earth to the glory of God and the benefit of our neighbors. Of course, that involves all kinds of specific details. We discuss those in many of the articles at cornwallalliance.org.
All right, cornwallalliance.org. Dr. E. Cal Beisner, Cornwall Alliance for the Stewardship of Creation. Thank you for being with us.
And thank you.
And the U.S. military is sending tanks and armor to allied countries in Europe. It's also boosting cyber defense efforts in response to Russia's annexation of Crimea and intervention in eastern Ukraine. NATO forces have been training to take on Russia if necessary. U.S. Defense Secretary Ashton Carter spoke about the situation during a visit to Estonia.
While we do not seek a cold, let alone a hot war with Russia, we will defend our allies, the rule-based international order, and the positive future it affords us all. That's why I'm pleased to announce, and I discussed with my colleagues earlier today, that we will temporarily stage one armored brigade combat team's vehicles and associated equipment in countries in Central and Eastern Europe.
Last week, Russia introduced 40 intercontinental ballistic missiles to its nuclear arsenal. Carter says the move reflects posturing by Russian President Vladimir Putin. Putin denies his government is behaving aggressively. He says they're just pursuing its interests. A grim milestone for Iraq. The UN says more than 3 million people have now been displaced as a result of Islamic State violence. It says the majority of the displaced are from Anbar province. It's Iraq's Bridge of Sorrows, a rickety crossing point over the Euphrates River for those who have lost their homes, their livelihoods, almost everything but for a glimmer of hope. On this bridge, soldiers check papers on the lookout for ISIS infiltrators, but most are simply seeking a semblance of peace. There was an airstrike, Muahim Hussein says. Our house was destroyed and I was hurt. We left because of fear and terror. We couldn't sleep at night. Jama Ali recently suffered a stroke. He was pushed over the bridge on a cart, clearly in pain. He's unaware of where he'll end up. I don't know, he says. I have nothing. Going the opposite way, food and other goods. There's a war on, but business never stops. Even in that remaining 20% of Anbar province that's still under government control, ISIS is present. Iraqi security forces recently rounded up more than 20 men suspected of being members of the Islamic State. Civilian cars sit idle on the far side of the river. Cars from Anbar aren't allowed over the bridge for fear they may be full of explosives. The only solace is a dip in the river. Welcome relief to these boys from the scorching summer heat. Those without the means to go any further, or someone to vouch for them to security forces, end up in tents on the side of the road. They complain of lack of basic services, food, and clean water. We have nothing, Saad Naji says. If you get sick here, either you recover or you die. A lot of the children are sick, but most of us don't have the money to send them to a doctor. And so they must sit and wait in the heat and dust with their sorrows. Up next, when the Holy Father visits South America next month, he'll hear sweet harmony. And the Pope has family too. Francis hangs with his cousins and their kids in Turin. God's love is free. He asked for nothing in return. All he wants is for his love to be accepted. A tweet from Pope Francis today. Thanks for joining us on this Tuesday evening, the 23rd of June. I'm Brian Patrick. Pope Francis visits South America next month with stops in Ecuador, Bolivia, and Paraguay. Catherine Szeltner is here to report on how the family is preparing to welcome the Holy Father.
Brian, being able to see the Pope is the chance of a lifetime. Being able to sing for the Holy Father is even more rare of an opportunity. For 3 siblings in Paraguay, that's their reality this summer. These siblings are in perfect harmony. Gabriela, Joaquin, and Jasmine Santiago will sing at a mass celebrated by Pope Francis in Paraguay this July. The sisters have performed for a pope before, singing for St. John Paul II during his 1988 papal visit.
I have the opportunity again to be close to a representative of Christ in our country, but I ask, why me? I am just like any other person.
But this is younger brother Joaquin's first time singing for a pontiff. The siblings are part of a choir that's 500 members strong. The Santiagos believe it's a chance to share the gifts God gave them.
It makes you so happy. It's very emotional.
The choir director says all of God's people are represented in this singing group.
We have people ranging from 15 years of age to 82. We have people with disabilities in the choir. We have blind people, those with different types of disabilities.
500 different voices lifting up praise to one God. Catherine Szeltner, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Catherine. Music to our ears. Pope Francis enjoys a very special gathering in Turin on Monday, a family reunion. The Holy Father met with 6 cousins and their families, about 30 people in all. He celebrated Mass with them, followed by lunch. Francis briefly visited the Church of Santa Teresa. That's where his grandparents were married in 1907. His father was baptized there. The Pope's family reunion helps emphasize his value of family ahead of the World Meeting of Families and October's Synod on the Family in Rome. Until tomorrow, for the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. And finally tonight, we return to Charleston, South Carolina. The Diocese of Charleston organized this ecumenical service for the victims of the Emanuel AME shooting. May they rest in peace.